I'm Rose Lucenti. So we're going to go through these questions, and then Susie will write them down so that we have the responses from everyone. So, in the continuum of education and training taking place in the state, what role are the CTEs playing now? So, we can just...
We'll get rolling here. I've got my colleagues that
Yes. In the continuum of education and training taking place in the state, what role are the CTEs playing now from this point? We have a laptop.
Yes, I think you'll just do that and not with this. That works.
I think CTEs are trying to bring relevance to young people about what is school and what is after school. What's it all about? And so I think CTEs engage kids who have a passion, but maybe don't know what to do with it. I think of kids who like to play computer games, or train dogs, or work on cars.
Can everybody hear?
So I think they're a little bit focused more on high school age students to try to say, well, you like these things, you can use these things as a way to graduate from high school. I don't know that they realize that once they enroll, we're gonna say, yeah, and
Yeah.
do you know about dual enrollment and da-da-da-da-da. Where we're handicapped, I think, is we have one system, whether we're a full day or a half day, and it doesn't really help that much. The person who had the question about the adult learner, they really have to be able, in the school I worked in, to be able to come all day long. And we had to have an empty seat for them to come in the first place.
For the adult learner.
The adult learner.
Yeah, we were.
So some flexibility in the, maybe an intensity in the program. They might not need all the credits to graduate from high school, they need the career training. Is there a way to get that, absent all of the academics needed for high school? Right now, an adult who comes has to do it all, because that's the way we're set up.
Okay, great. Rachel?
So I would definitely affirm that. In our experience, they're the ones who connect the high school students with the outside world, either through professionals or through training programs, or making that relevance to real-world problems or real-world training programs to connect dots. And also, I would say in terms of the continuum, they're fabulous collaborators and really just kind of willing partners in adult education with the use of their space or their professionals. That they have been really easy to work with and more than willing to find a way to make adult education work.
I would echo what Rachel said about, in most places, working really effective with our offices and customers around. If we see an employer need, we can go to them and they'll create a program for us. And so I think that's great.
And is that statewide? Is that what you're saying?
Not
or
totally, but close.
Close, okay.
Well, and they provide training for certificate programs. I mean, they're the ones we partner with for an LNA training or manufacturing or whatever.
So that's stackable, I guess.
Right.
Is stackable, yep. Good. Okay. Anyone else on that?
Well, I would just say something about the adult ed portion of technical education, and that's sort of, as far as state funds supporting a role in a technical center, that's the most unsupported role from the agency of education's perspective. I think they get some support from the Department of Labor, but it's really a business model that they have to sustain the wages of the person or the people that are running the adult technical education programs. So if that's an area that as a state we say this is really critical to the success of our workforce, is there money to support it somewhere? Is there will to make that money happen? This is what when I talk to the adult technical education coordinators, this is what I hear. In areas where the economy is struggling in some regions of the state, there's no business to support that position, so it becomes a catch-22. If there are no businesses who want training through adult technical education, then there's no salary for that person, so they can't offer as much. But if businesses came to the region, the center doesn't have an adult technical education coordinator, This is the vicious cycle that occurs.
Well, and adding to that catch-22, Jay, is that a lot of employers know they need some training, but don't necessarily know how to put it together. Who are the training providers? What are the elements of curriculum? That kind of thing. And that's what adult ed coordinator can play that role unless there is no such thing. So, here we go. But our Vermont training program that we have at the Agency of Commerce can fund employer-specific training at regional technical centers, but you gotta have either an employer or a group of employers who are saying, I need this training, and then the center, either on their own, can put it together, or another training provider could come in and use the center as a physical space. So we are a funding source, but it has to be employer-specific. We have to have employers who are signed up, ready to do that, do the hiring when the training is completed.
Do you think that there's a bit of a disconnect and folks aren't aware of this as a resource in the field?
Quite possibly, but we are constantly putting that information out there. My experience in 30-plus years of economic development, you tell somebody one thing and you'll talk to them again 6 months later, like they never had the conversation 6 months ago, and it's only until they're like, oh, I have a need, and it's front of mind, and then hopefully the bells go off, or hopefully our timing is such that, oh, there it is. So it's a constant need to get out to folks on resources. So.
Well, because I'm wondering, just to follow up, that it might be that folks are thinking, oh, it needs to come from adult technical ed, when no, the resources are actually there, they're just not called that, they're called something else. So that's something maybe that we can think about coordinating and getting the messaging out around that.
Or pre-K for our lowest paid earners, then I think we can really fill two birds, right? We can have kids benefit.
But I'm sorry, Rose, but I think that is a weak link in our system of the people who can work one-on-one with an employer to help them wade through what it takes to develop these kinds of training programs. Everybody does, like VR, you do it really well. Program specific does it really well, but there's no sort of ombudsman, if you will. And back in the day of school to work, that's a lot of what those folks did. And then that kind of fell to labor or adult ed coordinator, but then recession hits and nobody's got time to do anything other than deal with the crisis of the day. And so when we step back and try to say, okay, how do we make those partnerships and provide that technical assistance, particularly small businesses who don't know how to wade through the system. Large businesses have full-time HR staff, but not so much on the small businesses. So that pooling function becomes important. Are there 5 businesses that need the same need? And,
Even if they're not in the same spot.
and then, but are they in the same region where, it's reasonable to drive to a CTE or distance learning or whatever the case might be. And we do have a pretty robust distance learning network, both within the K-12 system, but even state colleges, where's Vermont Tech, you've got a system. So now that VIT is sailed off into the sunset, there are still those opportunities through distance learning so that you can have a program theoretically function statewide.
I think it's giving up there.
Are you? That's not
Because
good.
I think we're picking it up.
They're giving up what?
It's true.
Oh, you are? Bummer.
What, say that again? So
The distance learning opportunity through AOE is disappearing.
Well, it's not disappearing, it's going over to your shop.
Right.
But will it still be available to multiple users in your shop, do you think?
I think it
Diane?
could be. I mean, we've got video conferencing equipment in all 12 of our field offices, so we could certainly talk about that, absolutely.
When we did that online, all the different states sharing best practice, that's what came up, was the need for a clearinghouse to do exactly what you're talking about. Whereas one place can an employer call or even a job seeker call. Where is there a clearinghouse that is statewide, focused on education and workforce development?
I think that's one thing, Lynn, but I think the other thing is connecting the dots for the employer.
Actually writing curriculum.
Yeah, right,
But it
exactly.
sounded like Maine and Kentucky
Yeah,
and
right.
Ohio, it sounded like they were doing that.
Right.
The Vermont Tech's continuing ed workforce development division does some of that also.
Yes, and CCV does a good job,
Some
I mean,
adult
yeah,
coordinators also.
right.
Yes.
Oh, we do that with a lot of.
So we seem to kind of be talking about adult technical education and workforce training, which is good. But before we talk about clearinghouses and all this stuff, we have to address the issue that there is no system for adult technical education in the state. There are 16 regional systems. There is not one system. And this is something we've been trying to, beat our heads about for years. The only thing it says in statute is that a regional career and technical education center has to employ an assistant director for adult education. It doesn't specify how many hours a week that person has to work. It doesn't specify that they have to have rigorous programs of study. They could have basket weaving, doesn't matter. It's up to each regional center and the governance the structure that exists there. So we do have really great, rigorous workforce development programs, but it's based solely upon the people that are in the jobs and the people that are on the boards at that time. So if we really want to use CTE in the adult format for workforce education and training, we need to have a structure, and we need to have funding for a structure. Because right now, we get a little mere pittance of money from the Agency of Education, and we get grant funding through DOL. We used to get a lot more. We were able to buy equipment, do training programs, wet fund grants, through your shop, we did some stuff, so we can do training programs, but there really isn't a system. And if we're going to use CTE efficiently, we need to address that and look at how we can best do it.
Tom Walsh from Resource. I mean, I think that it's more than 16 centers too. It's because there's that universe of Vermont Works for Women Resource, other providers beyond that who do job training are sort of intermediaries in some ways between schools and employers, but in some cases directly with individuals who are not connected with high schools at all and getting them connected to employers. And that further complicates, I think, your point. It makes it all the more important that we develop some sort of coordination systems to support that communication, to make it work better.
And I'm not saying that CTE is the answer, because it's not. We certainly need all of those other functions within it. But CTE is the statewide, through the Agency of Education, technical vehicle for training. So either we're going to use it or we're not going to use it. And if we're going to use it, we have to create it better. So it doesn't mean that it's the only thing, but I don't know if people are even aware that it's pretty dysfunctional and it just kind of works depending on who's employed there and who's on the board and how much support you're given at a regional level.
So I think that goes right into the next question, which is, of the many existing coordinated activities and partnerships taking place among and between CTEs and other education, training, and service delivery entities, what works well, what should change, and where does CTE fit into the education and training pipeline in Vermont? So what is working well?
The apprenticeship programs through DOL and VTC. The apprenticeship programs work very well.
Customized employer training, I think, works well. And I don't want to have anybody think, geez, Pat, aren't you aware we do all this curriculum coordination? Because I think we do it. I mean, the CCV does a good job, VTC does a good job, VR, the silos do a good job, but it's Eileen's point about how do you coordinate the system. But I do think we do well in the CTE on employer-specific training.
And I hate to say it, but I think a lot of the reason we do so well is because there's money attached.
Right.
Don't hate to say that.
There's a way to help pay for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. It's like, hey, look, we can get some money and actually do a good job.
What we accomplished with the school to work funds.
Yeah, that was amazing. The career exploration and other stuff that was going on during school to work was like right where we wanted to be. Funding dried up, poof, gone. So, and I don't know how you embed some of that so that it isn't poof gone when the money's gone.
Anything else working well? What should change? Okay, we're thinking.
I think career and technical education is sort of on the forefront of looking at aligning with colleges for separate kind of dual enrollment leading to high-value workplace certificates. I think this whole notion of a step between whatever you're doing in school and a college degree. There are many steps inside there that I think career and ed is beginning to document, certify, and explore. Not
With the
all over the
employers
state,
as well.
I guess, but,
With the employers as well.
well, the employers are helping identify what is a high-value
Everybody
workforce
identify
certificate.
yourselves.
Anyone else have
I think where there are good, robust program advisory committees, I think those programs are working really well. It's been a while since I've sat on any of those committees, but I think that's an opportunity right there. I think that we've got most regions of the state really great facilities now at CTE, and so you know, I think there's a lot of positive. I think where the negatives are, and I know we're only talking about the good stuff now, is just, you know, how do you get more kids in? You know, how do we better utilize those facilities, those kinds of things? How do we recognize that CTE has value in a broader way?
Well, this doesn't really speak to that question, it's just, in the plan, it talks about the fact that all of the partners need to know what services each of the partners brings to the table. And I mention that because it's an easy place to start. And I would love to see us start with something concrete. But I guarantee you, we don't know what each of the others provides. And so you don't even think about that resource being available. It would really help one of your clients move through the system, or, you know, really what is the flexibility of a CTE?
Back to the clearinghouse.
You know,
Where do you plug in?
because Eileen's point is absolutely well taken. It's 16 different models, but at least we start with what each of those 16 models has incorporated.
Right, and we have
I think the other things that are working well, I think the high school completion program is working very well in terms of as a pathway for dropouts, but others who are sort of maybe on the edge of dropping out and just sort of go through finish their high school diploma through the high school degree program. I think that is successfully enabling some of this alternative pathways to learning, to getting placed into jobs. I think that's a pretty good model. That certainly some of the old things that we had in place didn't work as well.
And it's a statewide model. Agency that gets credit.
That's, okay, anything else that we wanted to add to this?
Well, I would say something that's working and could be working better, I think, we could see more of is more collaboration between high school teachers and tech center teachers, academic teachers. They are trained teachers, trained academic teachers. Our tech ed teachers are industry experts, and they go through a teacher preparation program at VTC to learn to be teachers, but they're not academic content experts. So I've been trying to create opportunities for them to see each other as resources. One of the things that high school students often lack is context for the theories that they're learning. So can the teacher learn a little bit of context from the CTE teacher? So we're seeing success in there for the building trades instructors, I think, through Math and CTE, which is a program that we're working on to help the construction teachers enhance the math that's already in their programs. We've had another project that North Country and Essex were a part of to help get more young women into programs that they wouldn't traditionally be in, and they partnered with their high schools, guidance counselors and other teachers to help think about how to solve this problem of getting young women into these programs that lead to jobs that pay more than minimum wage, that are going to be higher paying than they would jobs that they would normally go into. So it's how do we create opportunities for the adults to learn together and combat their stigma about tech ed? And then how do we reach earlier to students? These are questions that we're not going to answer today, but can we reach 9th and 10th graders? Can we reach 7th and 8th graders to get them interested and help explore? 6th graders. 5th grade, do I hear 4th?
We have 4th graders coming in after school for after-school STEM projects.
Nice, nice.
So reaching earlier to give a little context and help them think about jobs, not college necessarily. What work do I want to do? Maybe more importantly, what work do I not want to do?
We're really hoping in both rehab that our new requirement to start working with youth in their freshman year right up through their senior year and embedding VR counselors in the schools along with a youth employment specialist will really get at what you just spoke to. I think we'll be engaging freshmen and sophomores in looking at career exploration.
The Vermont Standards Board for Professional Educators also changed the endorsement for career tech ed to go down into the middle school so that they too can work with middle school programs as a licensed educator. So the old industrial arts or trades or exploratories at the middle school that are tend to be going away can now be actually done with a CTE teacher.
But we can't get funded.
Yeah.
It's that money thing again, how do you pay them?
So another thing that I think is working well with CTE, and somebody correct me if it isn't exclusively CTE, but last week it was Entrepreneurship Day at the State House, and to see your FBLAs and your various other clubs and groups that were so engaged in business plans and entrepreneurship, I think that's awesome. It would be great if that were occurring on the high school side of life too. Maybe it does, I don't know, maybe I'm ignorant to that, so.
There are more FBLA chapters in high schools now than there
Than
are
in Texas, okay, good, cool. But more of those kinds of, again, experiential, hands-on group, be it FBLA, FFA, name your.
Skills.
Yeah, right, so skills and certifications. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the strength of the high school completion program. I think we can use that model in multiple ways. And what that is, it's really a collaboration between the school, the AEL provider, and the student to come up with a personalized learning plan. And I think that's where personalized learning plans really sprung off from, and that's what the success is. So Jay, when you're talking about trying to bond together the teachers at the high school and the teachers at the tech center, what happened in the personalized learning plan, the development of that? I mean, I see the model of high school completion, which I've been in that program since the beginning, and I also look at freshman in college, son of mine, who doesn't have any more technical skills to screw in a light bulb. Somewhere along the way, his personalized learning plan went all academic. But I'm in hopes that, that kind of, with a personalized learning plan, these kids should be exposed to more opportunities. And so maybe that's the foundation of where you're going to look at. These kids are not being exposed to things.
And just so you know, HSCP is not limited to kids. There is no age limit on that program. If someone is missing a high school diploma, they are eligible for the high school completion program. There is no age limit.
And I want to echo what Pixie's saying, that also, someone without a high school diploma is also considered a person with significant barrier to employment. So most of those people are also going to be eligible for WIOA funding for jobs.
That's my fantasy, Heather. We just blow up the regional technical system. It's all one system. Everybody has to take their academic and CTE.
So would that come under what should change, Pat?
Yes, it just do it. No more you and them, no more stigma, no more nada, nothing, zero, no more funding problem, nothing. Then, yes, so.
Connecticut, every single CTE instructor, director, everybody works for the state of Connecticut. They have as many problems as we do, they're just different.
But just making it one, I recognize you're still gonna have sending schools, but let's just give that student an opportunity to take auto mechanics if he or she wants to, or culinary, but also gets access to trigonometry and whatever else might be the case.
That's the schedule.
Makes life interesting, but let's do it.
they also.
Putting my parent hat on instead of my Department of Labor hat on, experiences with my own children. Fourth grader is doing a makerspace program after school where he's playing around with technology and robotics. It's great. My daughter, who's in middle school, did a woodworking class after school. Free, open to every student. I think these are, I think these are fairly new things for both of those age groups. And it's a wonderful feeder system to then step into a lot of what we're talking about. I mean, my daughter, she's learning how to swing a hammer, how to measure, how to lay out a project. She'll be so much more likely to think about the program.
Right.
I think one issue though is that a lot of guidance counselors don't look at CTE for all students. And that we talk about partnerships between CTE and academic teachers. I think I'd personally like to see all new guidance counselors have to do some sort of student teaching time at a tech center. I think that would help, because I think that we talk about getting more students, but I don't think that they're even told about it.
And that's related to the funding issues.
No, I think it's related to the old vocational stigma that CTE.
I agree very much that too, but they know that they're gonna lose money.
Yes, well, the school.
Yes. Until that's fixed, I don't know.
So, Rose, I just want to say, as far as like losing money, and Jay had.
Why are you pointing at me?
Jay was talking about, or Heather was talking about the 29% rate of students being in CTE. I just want to say that my main sending high school, for the past 10 years, I have gotten 65% of all of the juniors and seniors. And they're never worried about the money, they always do what's right for the kids. So that's not all of a mistake.
Is that, what's causing that, Eileen? Superintendent, leadership, what's the difference? That
Well, the two schools are like one, it's just a hallway, so kids see it all the time. We do active recruiting, we take the kids on tours as sophomores of all the programs. The guidance counselors don't know about all the programs, there's still some of that, oh, you want to go to college thing, but we're actively saying, yes, it's college and career. Our health sciences program, you get 9 dual enrollment credits when you go through it. So it's just a lot of recruiting and a lot of dialogue between the school and the career center and working well together.
How many sending schools have you?
We only have 2. We have that one and then we have Lake Region. Thank God, we've got a high percentage. And we have the 3rd largest enrollment in the state. Right, Jay?
I'll have to check my numbers.
So Scott Farr told me earlier it was a statutory requirement that you have 9th graders come to tour tech centers, is that right?
I don't.
Tech center, or the high schools have to provide access to all of the career centers, so providing names and addresses of students, and the high schools have to provide a genuine opportunity for those students to hear about the programs and to participate.
So how that happens varies per school, I'm sure. Because it would seem like if you could get every 9th grader to take a tour of the CTE, get its flavor, taste, that would be awesome. That would be great. Yeah.
And it should really be earlier, especially if they really are starting personalized learning plans in 7th grade.
Yeah, good point.
I'm not sure they're really starting, but.
I'm curious about something, maybe Eileen can chime in on this one, but, so how many CTE centers have parents go do tours of them at some point?
Well, I know we always have open houses. I know CTE just had a huge open house on Saturday. I saw the commercials for it on CAX every single morning. And Lynn, you can probably speak better to this, but I think what they do is they take one of their professional development days and actually make it on that Saturday so that, because contractually, I can't make my teachers come in on a Saturday. Unless I say it's staff development and then give them one of the staff development days off. And then I can, and I might steal that model next year. Because it's hard getting people in. We've had community things, we've had parents' nights, but it's hard to find the right time to get everybody in.
We actually started the Saturdays not only for parents, but middle school kids, because we had 9 sending schools, and we would never be able to teach if we had all those 6th and 7th graders coming in. But we were doing a career workshop for parents and we thought we might have 15, we had 50 people, and we didn't have enough of it, that was last year, I don't know what happened.
I asked the question because I feel like one of the things that, it feels like we have to step back from the problem even more so, because one of the things, it feels like the culture, it's a cultural thing, that we haven't built the culture that like, we should be doing both of these things, the high schools and the CT centers working together. I mean, I speak from experience.
Maybe there should be
there was a
something
kid in my life for a while that was a 17-year-old, and he was, that's where the farm kids go. And a lot of his friends, there was that total divide. You could have thrown a rock at the CT center from his high school, but he couldn't go over there. And
I think the Agency of Education should aim to have a commercial promoting career technical education in Vermont and list all of the 17 centers. Wouldn't that be great?
Well, also, I mean, couldn't you require, I mean, part of your graduation requirements could be a certain level of technical applied experiential learning that could take place at technical schools or CTEs, or it could possibly take place at other organizations that are doing that, or directly with employers. And I think some sort of practical, I mean, in many schools, I think require that already, or
Well,
some
the
form of it.
PLP is asking for that, so.
But you could expand the scope of it and put some sort of statewide mandate for the legislators.
Well, yeah, if you say, require it, when you get to the requirements for graduation, that's governed by each individual school of the sending high school. So unless you get each individual school board and every sending high school in the state of Vermont to agree to it, it ain't gonna happen.
Or change the law.
Unless you turn it into.
Yeah, legislature.
Or change the law, but we do love our local control, right?
Right.
So, but maybe it's time for a new model.
We did get 2 years of math. Sorry.
Well, at least 2 years.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay, so what should change?
between the lines in that report, but what I read.
Well, one suggestion is to integrate many more of the CTE programs in the high school.
Yeah, it sounds like that model
So,
really works.
I'm not sure, somebody else said that too, and I'm not, can someone explain to me what that means, integrate them into the high school? I don't know what that
So they're not
means.
standalone
Does that mean that
institutions.
the high school is doing them, or the CTE center is doing them? Because if you,
You're integrating the faculty. So instead of having a separate building that is CTE and a K-12, you have a lot of the programming. Now, this is a
Where are the
5-minute-old
facilities?
discussion.
Yeah, but
right, you can't.
The millions, right. Well, use them other ways. That was the beginning, this is just the beginning of this discussion. But this was a conversation, I just got back from DC, and this was a conversation there, which was that the career and technical education now doesn't require the space that it used to for programming because there's so much technology involved in the actual doing of the whatever it is. So could we look for additional uses for the existing 16 CTE centers in the state, that those become, I'm throwing this out, those become your one-stop career centers, because that's where the facility exists, and that you integrate a lot more of the technical education notion into the K-12 building and curriculum.
Yeah, and that sounds like it's a step towards, there is no CTE versus high school, that it's all one big center. You go over here for lab, you go over here for academic, or whatever, I mean, however you do it, you eliminate the funding disincentive, you just like blow the stigma right out of the water, and everyone has an opportunity to access. It does speak to schedule, it speaks to transportation, those kinds of things, but
It speaks to skills.
Right.
What high school teachers do you know that can
Oh, no, your
skill?
your
CTE's teachers stay doing what they're doing, but instead of getting, maybe 10 people, it becomes a required element of graduation, that you take some technical training. I mean, I don't know, I'm not the educator, I leave it to the experts in the room, but that you create one system, not two.
Exactly, so you're getting a taste rather than an immersion.
Yeah, right.
You can't do 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for a year, which you can maybe accommodate 30 kids in that model. You're saying all kids, so they get
We're brainstorming.
Yeah,
Right.
brainstorming.
They
We're
get half an
brainstorming,
hour.
no bad idea.
Well, no, I mean, as you say, this is a brainstorm. I have no answers. This is just a thought that was thrown out that had some merit. It was interesting to think about.
I'd like to see a strategy around gender, given the disparities in the occupational segregation and the disparities that we know are coming down the pike for adults if trends continue as they are. I'd like to see a strategy around CTE. It's interlinked with the WIOA that's next on the agenda. It's about thinking early, K on up, about a strategy of how are we going to it's in line with the last suggestion, really, of making things a little bit more unified and cohesive so that folks are not having the option to pigeonhole themselves or being encouraged to pigeonhole themselves right through adult training options. Because I feel like until the money is put there and the strategy is laid out, the plan, we're going to keep seeing the trends as they have been.
So I want to just go back to what Pixie said, because I think that could work really well in middle school. Because I think what you need to do is really get into the schools and provide programming on a shorter term basis, because middle school kids can't do full programs. And I think that's one of the really important things that we could push forward with the legislature, is to have the ability to work with middle school kids to develop shorter program, modular class kind of things, to really get those, those CTE kind of skills into the schools.
I wanted to say something about, has anybody, you keep saying that our school-age population is shrinking. We're 1,200 students less than last year. Well, if we look at the trends, the buildings aren't shrinking. So obviously there's some space. If we continue along where the students aren't there, then you have some space available to do what you're talking about, suggesting like a step-up program into within the middle school. Exactly.
Not to mention the fact that those buildings, for a good time of the day, from 3:30 until, because usually adult technical education classes are in the evening, 5 o'clock on.
Right.
So from 3:30 to 5, they're empty. They're empty. You could do a second shift of CTE programming for a whole population of people who don't necessarily, we have a lot of high school completion kids coming in and doing CTE programs now, but there are also a lot of people who are older who don't want to come in during the high school day.
Exactly.
We can use that building afterwards. I've talked to Jeb about doing VTC classes in the building. Lights are on, machinery's there. Use the building.
Well, I like the idea of, one requirement, expand the requirements for that technical education, experiential, perhaps incorporate a professional certification into graduation requirements. I'm not sure, Pixie, you need to blow up buildings or merge the two buildings, because I think they're
Oh, no, we need the buildings, we're just going to use them differently.
yeah, exactly. I think it's already busing. You already bus people all over anyway, so maybe it doesn't matter. But I think that really could go a long way to solving some of those, and both incorporate more sort of expectation that you go out and get technical education, but you also go out and work with employers as part of that requirement to graduate.
Heather, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but all this good stuff only works if there's some ability to provide a statewide mandate. Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay, so
If you're not familiar, and I think Eileen alluded to this, a lot of the stuff around that you're talking about, I don't know. We're not the kind of agency that has, some states we can mandate things to schools. We're not one.
No, but I know we have a lot of legislators here, so I think
Yes,
that
right.
change is possible.
I'm
gonna break the instructions that I was given. Only because I'm familiar with career technical education. I was on the Patricia Hannaford board for a number of years. And I was one of a very small group of people that felt very strongly about a change which I think would be well served for all career and technical education. And that is have your own governance. And Act 46, I think, will punctuate this more. When the local high school is the governance for the Career and Technical Education Center, the emphasis, enthusiasm, input is diluted in many instances. It certainly was with Middlebury Union High School, the board had been. And by going out on our own and hiring a dynamic director, I think we saw a lot of things change. And it's not easy, especially when you have sending schools where there's a disability associated with getting the kids there. And changing the financial piece is also critical if you're going to have a model that does what I think we'd all like to see it do. And Act 46, which I support, does make for a complication, because if you get larger districts and a board now not only has the high school and the career center attached to its hip, but 5 elementary schools that they're serving as a board for, there's just a further dilution in terms of what the career and technical education center will get from the parents, or what we have is a mixture of school board members, business people, and everything else on the board to make things happen. And I'll go just one step further in terms of a model that I would suggest, especially since the assistant secretary is here. And it's a bit radical, and it'll probably take a long time. But I think if you want to make the financial piece and the dynamics that career centers offer, I think they should be standalone high schools. And I think ultimately we might have a total of 32 high schools in this state, 16 career centers, 16 other high schools, average 700 kids, given how many kids that we have. You would reduce the cost per pupil significantly, and you would give the emphasis to career and technical centers that I think they deserve in terms of developing career paths for kids starting at a level below high school, starting at an elementary school level. The model that most European countries use very successfully, especially in Germany, where I think it's especially successful. I think jerking around with the system we have and tweaking it here, tweaking it there, isn't going to give you the results you want. I think you have to do something dramatic. And so, from my experience, in the one step that we took, and from what I visualized on the economic model, I think things need to be changed radically. And with that, I hope the chair of the committee will hear me. Otherwise, it's likely to get
Did we, I don't know if we comment on what needs to change? Okay, so, sorry.
There's nothing that school boards dislike more than mandates from the state. It's got to come from up.
What we're talking about, like developing that interest, casting that
Carrots.
vision out into the future.
Carrots
so
with
that someone
fun.
can see themselves as a meaningful
And
participant
that's, yeah,
in
there's
society.
not gonna be
Like,
additional.
I always break it down very
It's just not, but
structurally, because I'm
it's
a very
gonna have to
binary
be
person.
operating
Between fourth
a
and sixth
different
grade,
way
it's an
with
industry
what
focus.
you
Kids can understand where food comes from, how healthcare is provided, how something gets made on a production line. And then
I
by the
say in
time
my
you're
committee,
middle
I live in
school,
the
late
real
middle school,
world.
you're starting to see occupation, understanding that an accountant
Okay,
can work
so
for a
where does
farmer, and an
CTE
accountant
fit
can work
into
for a
the
hospital, can
education
work
and
for a
training
factory.
pipeline in
And then you
Vermont?
can start tailoring your curriculum by the time you get to high school,
It's a bridge.
specialize it, understanding how you can fit in, I believe in animals, and then you can see the occupations that it
Well, a super highway.
Well, I just want to share again, something that we shared in the meeting in Washington, National Skills Coalition. And that was the former governor from Virginia. And he was the champion of career and technical education. And what he did in Virginia as the governor was that there were high schools that had to meet certain standards and then were identified as the governor's magnet school. So the thought was, well, that should be true of career and technical centers as well, that you would give them the recognition of having met certain very high standards and getting the recognition of being the governor's magnet technical center. And it just, made a huge difference over time in terms of the recognition of the population for career and technical education. That suddenly this was the governor's recognition and stamp on career and technical education, which began to shift parents' stigma against vocational training. So just something that works in one state.
I think that's important and I like that, but I'm always struck by, so what about the kids who their school or their CTE is not a governor approved? You know, what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of an equity issue? And so I tend to favor a different approach, which is to raise all the ships up. I get it, I do. But I think we already have that to some extent going on, just when you actually look at resources. But it's an important point to think of.
Well, and what it really gets down to, whatever the model is, it's having a champion as the leader. And he was a champion for career and technical education as the governor of the state, so that made a huge difference.
I think another thing that needs to change, and I think the pathways work gets us there, is to have some clear pathways from CTE into college, whether it's VTC, CCV, whatever the case might be. And that's happening now in some programs, but it'd be really nice if that were better developed in a lot more areas. So I think the pathways
areas meaning like more curricular streams?
Yeah, more
yeah,
curricular
okay.
streams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not college, but
Post-secondary credential,
Right.
some sort, yeah, some post-secondary credential, doesn't have to be, but pathways that can lead to college, yes, but that have got open exits and entrances where you can get in and out and it's clear where you're headed. Yeah, with stackables and, I mean, everything we've been talking about, but we gotta make that happen. And and I hear you, Representative Dakin, that school boards don't like mandates from the top. And ideally, it's coming from the bottom, but we've been trying to make it come from the bottom for the 33 years I've been doing this work, and it ain't happening yet. So what are we gonna do to make it different in the future? Because literally, our economy is at stake here, literally. When we don't have enough people now, and if we're not gonna be able to feed these employers over here and others, then we're in trouble. And I don't think we can survive on farmers markets and ski areas alone. With all due respect to the farmers in the room, I think it's fabulous, but we gotta have some, we have to have a good diversified economy, which we have now, but we gotta be able to feed it. And it comes from the workforce.
Could I add on to that? That Act 77 actually did a really nice job with the vouchers for dual enrollment, because it has opened that conversation between the high school teachers and the colleges to say, well, if you teach this and they get this credit and it looks like our course, when they come to us, they get, this is where they are then. And it's allowed that conversation between faculty and the secondary teacher. So please keep funding
Dual enrollment,
vouchers,
right,
because they really are powerful.
It's huge.
By the way, you're gonna start making $45.
I don't think it's done.
Appreciate this marketing.
One of the other things that really maybe has to involve when we get back together and do the employer group, I think some of the training experiences won't cost more because they'll be done by employers who will have an incentive to participate because they're really needed workers. And we're noticing that right now and have a lot of partnerships with manufacturers who are really need workers, need folks coming in the door. And so we're able to engage with them, tailor our training to their needs, but also get them engaged with it to actually do some of the training. So it's a sort of combination. Also, they're giving promises to hire, which is pretty valuable in itself. So I think that, there's the question of there's not money and there's not going to be more money. I mean, I might debate that, but I mean, I think I know that there's a lot of pushback against that. But, I mean, we've got money. What's the alternative?
That sounds like it's going to take forever.
Like this seems like a simple problem to answer your question. Like where do we see value? We see value.
Anything else? Yeah, I'm really pleased to hear us talk about the adults in the system as well as the traditional age students. And
it's funny, we haven't used the term lifelong learning centers, and we all know that. But I think if we were to think of the CTEs and use the language lifelong learning centers, I think it would provide access to an additional population that definitely needs these services. We were just at they used to call it the Senior Expo, but now they call it the Boomer Expo. And you just wouldn't believe how many people were there who said, I want to continue to work. I'm still working now, but I want to prepare for my next career. Where can I go? So that's the where. Then the other huge issue is I need somebody to help me to make the decisions. What we're saying, and it's in this report, is that the jobs that exist tomorrow, we don't even know what they are. Well, how would you like to be a 40 or 50 or 60 plus age person and not even know what, you have to work another 10 years, but you've been out of those jobs, and you've been out of school in the traditional system so long that you're not just sure how to go back in. One more piece about that is we work with commercial workers, and we've got funding where we can help them develop computer skills. The problem is, our funding source puts us in a silo. I can only serve low-income people, 55 plus, who have huge barriers to employment. So I need somebody for some funding. I've got lots of expertise in our company. Then we could serve lots of people, but we need some funding that would be able to allow us to do that.